Okay. Good morning, everyone. I think it's working. Okay. Quick thumbs up if you can see and hear. Okay, Boker Tov, thank you. Great to see you all today. Let's get this 1 second. Okay. Okay. I think we are good. Hang on 1 second. Let's make sure this is working. Okay, I see everyone. Great. Okay, Boker Tov. Hope you're doing well. Awesome to spend the morning together. And it's hard to believe as I look around this room that this is the last year of our series. And I just want to say thank you because the fact that, first of all, you're still here, we're still learning together, is an amazing gift. But moreover, I want to thank you for the opportunity to go on this journey together, because for me, this has been such an eye-opening and enlightening and inspiring year of learning together, especially by exploring the cities of Israel. For me, it has had the opportunity to reinforce my own personal connection to Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel, to the state of Israel, to the vision of Eretz Yisrael. And it's also connected me to Hashem and an awareness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in new ways that maybe I could have never even imagined had we not gone on this journey. So this was, as they say in Chicago, an experiment. In America, we call it an experiment. And judging by the fact that we're still learning together, it seems that we have accomplished, at least to some goals, the fact that we could spend this time together. And a double thank you, because usually we reflect at this time of year, it's almost Rosh Chodesh Av. We reflect on how much we learned this year and think back to all the cities that we traveled and all the learning that we did. But the fact that we're still learning together, even though we have the distance, the physical distance, I could see some of you are in your homes, and I can't see everybody, but some of you are in the kitchen, some of you in the living room, some of you in the dining room. I don't see anybody exercising right now. I guess that's okay. But really, the idea that we have been committed to being makdish, to dedicating this time to growing and learning and thinking, is something that I appreciate so much, because it would be very easy to say, look, we're not in person, so we're not going to make the time, or we're going to have other priorities. But the fact that you have all spent this time together with me is just incredibly meaningful. So thank you. And we're going to, so to speak, end at the beginning. That's where we're going to end today. We're going to end today at the beginning, because the city that we're going to talk about today, in a certain sense, represents beginnings. We could have opened with this city, because this city is actually the sister city of the city of Chicago, right? Chicago has over 24 sister cities that have various business, cultural, and municipal ties around the world in different countries. The city that we're going to visit today is Chicago's sister city. So you could have argued that we should start with this city way back at the beginning. This city is also, in one respect, it's the beginning of the settlement of the modern land and state of Israel, because its nickname is the Aim HaMoshavot, the mother of the settlements. Moshavot meaning agricultural settlements. It's not the first kibbutz. It's now it's a city, but originally it was an agricultural settlement that was founded in 1878 as the Aim HaMoshavot. It was actually from a few religious folks who came from Yerushalayim, from the Yishuv HaYashan, to establish a religious settlement. This settlement was on several dunams of land that was purchased west of Tel Aviv in the Sharon Plain, but it was at the beginning of the Yarkon River, which was very much swampland. There was almost no way to live there. They had to drain the swamps, and that's why they planted, for those who go there today, you will find many eucalyptus trees. Why do they have eucalyptus trees? Because eucalyptus trees, they suck up the water. This place is none other than Petach Tikvah. Petach Tikvah is a city today in Israel that has 269,271 residents. It has 60,199 students who were in their school system 2 years ago, as the recent statistics. It's interesting that the median salary for a family living in Petach Tikvah is 21,612 shekels. The average family has 3 children. And statistically, they have 73,983 businesses, and most children are born on Monday. These are all furnished for you by the Iriyah, which is on their website. You can find lots of interesting and cute things. It's a very big business center. There are several industrial centers in Petach Tikvah. It's in the center of the country, of course. But for us, it enables us to think about the words, the name, Petach Tikvah, and that's going to be our focus today. What does it mean when we speak of the Tikvah? What does the Ribbono Shel Olam want us to understand in our lives can be understood and appreciated by thinking about Tikvah, HaTikvah, Petach Tikvah. Now, the words Petach Tikvah come from a pasuk. This pasuk is in Hosea, even though Hosea is unfortunately mostly a book of criticism, Hosea has a few lines of blessing, of optimism, of hope, of uplift. And we'll talk about these, what they mean in a little bit. I'm going to take the Jewish people, I'm going to take you out on a date, so to speak. I'm going to walk with you. We're going to go for a hike to the desert. We're going to talk, and I'm going to speak to your heart. V'nasati lo'es krameh misham v'es emek achor lepesach tikva. V'onsa shama kimei ne'ureh uchiyom alosa me'eret Mitzrayim. Hashem Yisbarach says, even though it's going to look like desert, I'm going to give you vineyards. Remember, we spoke about the blooming of the desert in Sde Boker and the Negev. But then he says, we're going to take what is Emek Achor. The word Achor takes us way back to the Sefer of Yehoshua, where the Navi describes Achan and the theft, the embezzlement of gold from the city of Yericho, from the ban, and how by stealing, he had literally Achor. It's hard to translate in English. It doesn't just mean to ruin, it means to shatter and to betray. So we're going to go from the Emek Achor, from the Emek, the abyss, the nadir of betrayal, Achor, to Pesach Tikvah, to the opening of hope. And then it will be just like our youthful years, like the days when we went up from Mitzrayim, when we had such a beautiful relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Petach Tikvah, this perspective of the opening of the hope, is the opposite of the Emek Achor. It's the opposite of the valley of betrayal. And so that gives us our perspective. Tikvah, lekavos, is the word in Hebrew that we could focus on for meaning hope. It's not the only word. For example, lo ayachel. Yachel Yisrael also is related to the idea of hope, and there are others. But tikvah has a special connection, and it's interesting because the word tikvah or kaveh, has a certain feel to it, because the word kav means a line. You're drawing a line between two things, right? Lekavos, to hope for something, is to connect to it. So the word kav, like the Navi says in Yeshaya, kav lekav. That's why today in Israel, if you want to know about a bus line is called a kav, right? A line in Hebrew is a kav. Great. So there is a pasuk, which we're going to say in a few weeks, which we're gonna think about it in different ways, but I want to focus on the last line, which probably also has something to do with Elul. But the end of Mizmor Chav Zayin, that we call, when we say LeDavid Hashem Ori, the last line is a very peculiar line. Kaveh el Hashem, that word kaveh, hope. Kaveh el Hashem, hope for Hashem. Chazak v'yametz libecha v'kaveh el Hashem. Why the repetition? Hope to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, be strong and have courage in your heart, and then again, Kaveh el Hashem. I want to understand. What does this mean? What does this teach us about hope? Of Kivisi Hashem kivsa nafshi. What does this mean? And how does this relate? How does hope relate to an interesting quote that I saw from Shalom Aleichem? Shalom Aleichem, he said that hope is a liar. What do you think? Hope is a liar. Is hope really a liar? Maybe that's just a cynical Eastern European perspective. But I would hope that that's not true. Hope is not a liar. So what is hope? And what does it mean to hope for something? What does it mean, Kaveh el Hashem, to hope for something from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? What about all the people who hoped and what they hoped for didn't materialize? How do we relate to hope, especially this time? We're holding by the 3 weeks. We're faced with challenges. We know that we're in the midst of a terrible challenge. So what is hope? So there is a passage in this Sefer, a very interesting passage. This is the second volume of Alei Shur, Reb Shlomo Volbe, the great Musar giant of the 20th century, who survived the war to come to Israel and establish a base vad of Musar, a place where people think about and work on personal growth. He introduces the idea of tikvah as a Jewish value, as a perspective that we need to think about. And he points out that tikvah, hope, is not the same as emunah. It's not the same as emunah of feeling the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's not the same as bitachon, trusting in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He defines tikvah as distinct from emunah and bitachon. Tikvah is something else. So what is it? What is tikvah? So to illustrate tikvah, he quotes the Gemara, a story in Maseches Brachos. Now, some of you are familiar with this story. There was a king. This king was an incredibly righteous king. It was mamish, the highest of the high. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin that maybe he could have even been Moshiach, this king. His name was Chizkiyahu. Chizkiyahu, the king of Yehuda, came into the world at a time where it was terrible. Avodah Zarah was was rampant. Every corner of the Jewish world in Israel had been influenced by the Assyrians, by Melech Ashur and the Assyrian pagan worship. 10 tribes being exiled, siege on Yerushalayim, but more was the potential spiritual decay. So Chizkiyahu set out to mend our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu collectively. And he brought people in the entire country, at least in his Malchus, in the smaller tribes, the Malchus Yehuda, back to the Ribono Shel Olam. And that was a reformation, a renaissance of Yiddishkeit that's stead him in good stead, which was that enabled him to believe that he would be able to survive the siege and the onslaught of Sancheiriv. And the Navi told him he would survive, and he did. The spiritual mettle of the Jewish people had been strengthened. Yet, at one moment in his life, Chizkiyahu faced a crisis, a personal crisis, different than the crisis of the Sancheiriv armies banging down his door. And that is that he took ill and he ended up essentially on his deathbed. The pasuk says, "Vayamim ahim cholach Chizkiyahu lamus vayavo elav Yeshaya ben Amoz hanavi vayomer ko amar Hashem tzvakos sav levesecha ki meis ata v'lo sichya." The prophet, the mamish, the greatest prophet of that time, Yeshayahu, none other than Yeshayahu, comes to his doorstep and gives him a telegram, a holy message from the Borei Olam to say, "My dear King Chizkiyahu, you have to get your affairs in order, so to speak. Put the papers together because it's over." That's it. So that's what it is, right? So why is this? The Gemara says, what does it mean? The Gemara says, he told him, not only are you going to die in this world, you're not going to have any share in Olam Haba either. Chizkiyahu. What do you mean, Chizkiyahu, the tzaddik? So Omar Lei, Chizkiyahu says to him, the Gemara records the exchange. How could that be? How's that possible? Omar Lei, Yeshaya said to him, Mishum delo asakta bepiria virivya. Because you didn't strive to have a family. It doesn't mean that every person who tries to have a family is going to succeed, but the mitzvah is not to accomplish pru'uvu. The mitzvah is asakta, to try to have a family, to try to bring children into the world. So you know what he answered? You know what Chizkiyahu says? He says, I'll tell you why I made that decision. It was a calculation. Because I saw in Ruach HaKodesh that I'm going to have descendants who are going to be unworthy. They're going to be, excuse me for saying it, they're going to be Rishaim, Lo Mali. They're going to sit on the throne of Malchus Yehuda, and they're going to take the Jewish people away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Yeshaya says to him something interesting. Why are you getting involved in the hidden secrets of God? Don't get involved in what's going to be in the future. The fact that you know something in Ruach HaKodesh, Lazam, leave it alone. Why are you getting involved? What your job is to do, you should do, and what the Ribono Shel Olam cheshbonos are, leave up to him. So Yeshaya says to him, leave it alone. Says Chizkiyahu, fine. So let's make a shidduch. If I have children, I want my son to marry your daughter. You talk a big game. So my son will marry your daughter. Maybe we'll have children that in both of our merits they'll be tzaddikim. And Yeshai says to him something interesting. Omar le kvar nigzra alecha gzeira. You're dead anyway. There's a gzeira against you from the Shamayim, mouth of the Navi, Chizkiyahu, it's over. It's too late, it's over. Omar le ben Amotz. Said Chizkiyahu to Yeshaya, he said to him, Ben Amotz. He didn't call him by his first name. He didn't say, Rabbi Yeshaya, holy prophet. He called him by his last name. He says, Ben Amotz, the son of Amotz, get out of here. Kalei nevuascha, stop prophesying. Vitzei, and get out. I have a tradition, kach mekublani mibeis avi abba, from my father's house, my grandfather's house. Afilu cherev chada munachas al tzavaro. Even if a person has a sharp sword on their neck, al yimna atzman orachamin. Do not withhold yourself for asking the Ribono Shel Olam for mercy. Miyad, what happens? The pasuk says, "Vayasev Chizkiyahu panav el hakir." Chizkiyahu turned his face to the wall, which is why many people have the practice to try to daven next to a wall. Let's say I see our minion captain here. I want to call him out to be Makir Tov to George Bornstein for making sure that our minion this week in Or Torah ran so smoothly. He gets very embarrassed when you do this. But you notice George usually davens next to the wall because he wants to be like Chizkiyahu. Like many have this practice that they daven, they put their face next to the wall when they daven, just like Chizkiyahu. You can't see it, but he's upset at me right now. You know what the Gemara says? Amr Shimon ben Lakish. It says he faced the wall. What does it mean, the kir? Kiros libo, the kir, the walls of his heart. That's where he davened from. It was the hartzig davening. He meant it. He poured out his heart to the Ribono Shel Olam. And what happened? Amr Shimon Lakish, it from his heart. And the Gemara concludes, guess what? He lived for another 15 years. He got out of bed. He went back to work. What do you mean he got out of bed, he went back to work 15 years? The Navi told him you were going to die. The Navi told him, don't bother asking. Could you imagine a more hopeless situation than Yeshaya HaNavi coming and delivering that to someone? Yet the pasuk says in Yeshaya, Perek Lamed Ches, Yeshaya comes back to me and says, yeah, I got another message. New memo. 15 more years. So what does this tell us? What does this tell us about hope? So Rav Wolbe says, you know what this tells us? It tells us that hope, it means that there is potential even in the most difficult, bleakest, darkest situations of Gzeira already being impacted. It's already been signed and sealed and delivered by the prophet. Because he quotes a section, from Rabbeinu Yonah in his commentary on Sefer Mishlei, who says that there is a concept of tikvah. He doesn't use the word tikvah, he uses ayachel, but Rav Wolbe says it's the same thing. He says what's called tocheles atzula min habitachon. What is bitachon? Now, there's obviously a lot more to say about this, but Rav Wolbe's position, like the Chazon Ish and others, bitachon does not mean that everything will turn out for the best. That's not what bitachon means. It means, bitachon means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God, knows everything, is aware of everything, has a plan for everything, has the ability to step in at any moment. God is there. Bitachon means God is in charge. He's got this. It does not mean that I'm going to see a happy ending from this story. That's not what bitachon means. Bitachon means I trust that God has it all taken care of. He's got it planned out. He's going to make it fair. He's going to make it right. He's watching. He could change. He could whatever. That's bitachon. So if you know that God can't do anything, so then he says Rabbeinu Yonah, Yekava liyeshua, so a person can hope for a Yeshua, gam im acherav munachas al tzavar adam. Even if Chizkiyahu says there is a knife on the person's neck, they can still hope for a Yeshua. What does that mean? They can understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can do anything. God is there. He can change the situation at any moment. And a person can respond with kaveh, with hope. Tikvah, hope, is the consequence of bitachon. Emunah means living with the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, having that awareness. Bitachon means trusting that God knows everything, can change anything, is in charge. And now hope, kaveh, means in the circumstance that we're in, we can hope for a better outcome. Now, what did Chizkiyahu do for a better outcome? He davened. And this is going to be really crucial because we want to understand, what does it mean then that just because God is aware of our situation and with us in our situation, but we know that that might not turn out the way that we wanted. What does it mean to hope? What does that mean? That we have a tradition, Chizkiyahu tells us in the story, always hope. Always hope. Never lose hope. Jews never lose hope. What does that mean? What does it mean not to lose hope? How do we understand that? So there is an amazing and incredibly powerful insight that is taught by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. Now he teaches this, he comes back to this same point in 3 different places. One is in this book, To Heal a Fractured World, which is from several years ago. A second one is in his Haggadah, and his third one is in this place, The Great Partnership. Maybe it's in more books. I know it from 3 different books where Rabbi Sachs makes the same point about hope. Because he asks several questions, different question in each book, and he comes back to the same point, which we really need to understand. Because it's such a big part of our lives, this question about hope. In The Great Partnership, he wonders why it was that Yaakov Avinu, when he was faced with the seemingly incontrovertible evidence that Yosef had been torn apart by a wild animal, refused to be comforted. And Chazal say that's because he held out hope. What is the pshat in that story? Why didn't Yaakov find consolation? He asks another question in this context in To Heal a Fractured World, where he wonders, if a person can be moral, why should we bother being religious? What does religion add to our lives that morality doesn't provide? And then in a third discussion, in the Haggadah, where he's talking about time, he distinguishes between what he calls linear time, time that follows one step after the next, versus covenantal time, which is not linear. And what is the difference? And Rabbi Sachs says the answer to all these 3 issues, and what gives us so much insight into the story in Yechezkel, in Yeshaya with Chizkiyahu, and what explains to us why Shalom Aleichem thinks that hope is a liar, but that's because he misunderstands hope, because it's not from a Torah perspective. What does it mean to hope even with the sword, God forbid, on a person's neck? What is hope? Rabbi Sachs says, I'll tell you. There's a difference between hope and optimism. What is optimism? An optimistic view of the world. Optimism, says Rabbi Sachs, is the belief that the world is changing for the better. I'm optimistic. I say, it's going to be better. It's going to be good. It'll be great. Right? People with this is a social psychologists talk about an optimistic bias. When we make decisions, different people have different biases. This is the old Kahneman, Tversky, psychological insights. We have biases. We have heuristics, frames. Different people have different biases. So people who have, let's say, you have an optimistic bias, you say, it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine, right? I'm driving, I don't know where I am, but I say, it's going to be fine. Should we take on this project? It's going to be fine. I'm running late to the airport. Should I stop for a Slurpee? Yeah, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. I don't know if anybody else has ever done that or thought that. Just saying. Maybe some people here, part of their makeup is they have an optimism bias. Optimism says it's going to be fine. But that's very different than hope. Hope does not mean it's going to be fine. Hope is the belief that together we can make the world better. Hope does not mean that it will be fine, that it will be better. Hope means that it can be better. There's the potential for it to be better, and we can do something to make that happen. Hope is not costless the way that optimism is. It carries with it a considerable price. Those who hope refuse to be comforted while the hoped for outcome is not yet reached. Given their history, says Rabbi Sachs, this is now in the Great Partnership, Jews were rarely optimists, but they never gave up hope. That is why when the prophets saw evil in the world, they refused to be comforted, because for that is what theodicy is, a comfort bought too cheaply. To say everything is going to be fine is passive, he writes elsewhere. It's saying it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine. But you know what? In this world, Bahai Alma, it's not always going to be fine. Optimism is cheap, optimism is false, and the truth is, I think that's what Shalom Aleichem meant. That's where optimism is a liar. Optimism is a liar because sometimes it happens, sometimes it's not. It's not necessarily even based in reality. To say that everything will be fine, it's not true. But to hope, to have tikvah, that it can be better, that is, I think that's what Rav Volbe meant that Rabbeinu Yonah is teaching us. That because we have bitachon, because we know that the Ribono Shel Olam is listening to us, because we know that he's with us, it could be that he'll bring us salvation. It's not necessarily true that he will, and we don't expect it. Chizkiyahu did not lie on his deathbed and say, yeah, it's going to be better. It's going to be better. I'm optimistic. Chizkiyahu was not optimistic. He was pessimistic, but he was hopeful. He maintained the notion, the vision, the perspective that it could change, that the Ribono Shel Olam runs the world and anything can happen. It may or may not, but it can. Yaakov Avinu, he didn't see Yosef's body. He says, I know that God runs this world. Things aren't always the way that they seem. Could be it'll turn out differently. I don't hope. I don't expect. I'm not optimistic, I'm not optimistic, Yaakov Avinu. But he says, I'm not going to be comforted. I'm not going to say it's all over. The destiny is over. Because anything can happen. Because the Ribono Shel Olam runs this world. So we need to be mekaveh. He says in the Haggadah, the difference between linear time, and he suggests that this might be the difference in historical movements. People who say that there is such a thing as linear time, that every day is better than the previous. Progress means that we're always moving forward. We're always optimistic. Tomorrow's going to bring something better. You know what? Those people end up being very disappointed. You could be very moral and you could be perpetually optimistic. And then you're going to have your dreams shattered on an ongoing basis. Because it's not true. Optimism is false in many cases. History, it leads us forward sometimes, but then it leads us backwards. Time is not linear. It's not that every day is going to be better than the previous day. We live as Jews because we are religious, because we are spiritual, because we are connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not in linear time. We rather live in what Rabbi Sachs calls covenantal time, in a time which is not a line, but it is a line between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is a kav between us and God. And that means through history, it takes winding turns forward and backward. Sometimes it's 40 years in the desert. Was the next day for the Jews in the Masos, right? We just read yesterday, Maseh. Some days they went closer to Israel, some days they went further back. If you were an optimistic Jew in the desert, it was geferlich. It was geferlich. Because one day is closer, the next day is farther. But in a relationship with God, when we have a direct line, Kavi El Hashem, Kivza Nafshi, our nefesh comes to the Ribono Shel Olam, then you know what? We can always hope. Because God is always with us and he always is on that journey with us, even if it's not going to be linear. Even if we're not optimistic, we're hopeful. Because as Rabbi Sachs says, we can do something. We can make a difference in the world. Where is that primary difference that we can affect change? Lamaisa, how do you actualize hope? Tefillah. That's why if you look on Rashi, in Rashi on that pasuk of Kavi El Hashem, Chazak v'yamitz libecha v'kavi El Hashem, he says it's referring to tefillah. And that's what Reb Tzadok, in the Tzidkas Tzadik in two places, Reb Tzadok HaKohen Lublin, the Heilige Reb Tzadok, he says the same thing. That kaveh means tefillah. And if this is true, what Rabbi Sachs and David HaMelech and Reb Tzadok are trying to tell us is, look, we don't have to be optimistic because optimism sometimes is misleading. We have to be hopeful. Kaveh, which means out of a deep sense of emunah and bitachon, that God is there and we trust that he's doing what is right in the grand scheme of things, but that because we have a relationship with God, we can reach out to him. Sometimes we can break through, even, says Chizkiah, a gzeira that is min hashamayim, stamped and delivered by a prophet, Yeshaya. Because we have a relationship with the God. We have a direct channel. We have a kav. Kaveh. We can connect to God. We can talk to God. Maybe yesterday we weren't on that level, but today we are on a new level through our growth through tefillah, through the experience of connecting, of speaking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Maybe all of a sudden somebody can find 15 more years. It's not that they're optimistic that that's going to happen, but they're hopeful because it could happen. It can. Jews know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can do anything, just like he took us out of Egypt and did so many miracles for us. And maybe that's why the frame of the pasuk is Kaveh el Hashem. We should hope to God. We should daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We should beseech him like Chizkiyahu when we're facing a crisis. And what happens? Sometimes people daven. Sometimes we daven, and the crisis is not solved. So you know what the pasuk says? Chazek v'yametz libecha. Be strong in your heart. V'kavi el Hashem. Hope again. Don't lose hope. There are two kaves because in between those kaves is a tragedy, is a failure, is a calamity. But it doesn't mean that we lose hope. It doesn't mean that the Ribono Shel Olam is not there with us. It doesn't mean that we don't trust that God is taking care of everything. And therefore, it's possible we may have to go back to God again and again. And maybe in this particular line of hoping, that hope will never actually materialize in the way that we want it. Yes, Chizkiyahu lived 15 more years. Yes, Yoshiyahu later became a great tzaddik and a reformation. But at the end of the day, we're going to observe Tisha B'Av unless the Mashiach comes, and we mamish hope that he does today, tomorrow. But we're going to observe Tisha B'Av because the Gzeira did end up coming to fruition. But do we lose hope? That's the amazing thing. That's the Chiddush. The Navi actually was struggling with people in the wake of the first Korban. People lost hope because they thought that God had abandoned them. But as long as we have HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we may not be optimistic. We may have to be pessimistic and realistic. We may know what is in store for us, but Kavi el Hashem, build a kav, build a line to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Many of you know the story of the Weitzner Rav, Reb Hirsch Meisels, Reb Tzvi Hirsch Meisels. Some of you knew him, who lived here in Chicago. So he has a sefer, Mekadesh Hashem, and in the introduction he tells a story of when he was taken to Auschwitz right before Rosh Hashanah 1944. It's an unbelievable, long, heartbreaking story. And there were a group of over 1,000 boys. There were a group of boys. They were put in a sealed barrack, waiting for them to be sent to, where they were going to go. And it was Rosh Hashanah. It's a long story. And because he had just gotten there was a big balagan. He had a shofar. They heard he had a shofar. One of the boys got a message to the Weitzner Rav to please bring them the shofar and blow the shofar for them. It's like, you can't even imagine. You can't imagine that. But you know what he invokes with them before he blows the shofar? He risks his life. It's like, you can't. He tells them, he references this same story of Chizkiyahu, of Kavi el Hashem, that even when the knife is literally on their neck, and these boys did go to the left, they did go up the crematory, the smokestack, but Kavi el Hashem. So what did he mean by that? Was he telling these boys who were in the clutches of the Gzeira min HaShamayim that they should die in the kingdom of hell, of night, of Auschwitz, that there was absolutely b'derech hateva, there was no way they were going to get out of there? There was not one shred of optimism. Why did he tell them to still kavi al Hashem, to still hope? Number one, like Chizkiyahu said, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu could change. It can change. But part of that is the kav, is the line that we have to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's not telling them to be optimistic, but he's telling them, hold on to that kav, to that connection to godliness that nobody could take away, even in the face of the most unspeakable horror and the most unimaginable and incomprehensible destruction. But even if the cherev chad munach al satzavaro, al yisyayish atzum v'harachmim, we should always hope. We should have the kav, the connection to godliness. We should daven, and that tefillah, we should know it can make a difference. It may or it may not, but it can. What's the opposite of hope? Of kaveh is yiyush. Yiyush. You know, the Gemara has machlokas in Bav Metzia. Children learn this. The boys learn this usually like in 6th grade. The Parak Eila Metzias. Some of you know this from your own upbringing. Some of you heard it from your children. Some of you heard it from grandchildren. Right? There's a famous sugya, machlokas Abai and Rava. Yiyush shalomidas. If a person, they were misyayish, they gave up hope on an object, but it was shalomidas. They had yish, but they didn't know, they weren't aware. Right? The Gemara has the whole question. If a person had yish, but it was shalomidas, it was without their knowledge, is that called yish, or they weren't aware of it? So how could they have yish if they weren't aware that the coin had slipped out of their pocket? Had they known it slipped out of their pocket, they would have had yish, but etc. Right? This is the famous Gemara about yish shalomidas, right? So one of the darshanim once pointed out, don't tell me about Abai, don't tell me about Rava. He said, yish, that's shalomidas. Anybody who has yish, they're out of their mind, they've lost their das. Every case of yish is shalomidas. A person who loses hope, who loses the kav to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is shalomidas. So it's interesting. The Gemara has the machlokas whether yish kadi in a different context, not Abai and Rava, Bishama, Bishilo, whether yish, if I'm misyayish from an object, whether somebody else can acquire it. How could it be that I'm misyayish from an object? I give up hope from this object, somebody else could acquire it. So the Heilige Rishner, Rabbi Yisrael of Rizhin, said, it's a knas. It's a penalty. Halacha penalizes somebody who gives up hope. Somebody else can walk off with your stuff if you lose hope. Hope for us is not a liar. Hope is eternal. Hope is eternal. Ha tikvah. Would anybody on Tisha B'Av of the first Beis HaMikdash or the second Beis HaMikdash or the Crusades or Auschwitz have ever believed that there would be a state of Israel run by Jews? Would they have ever believed that we would have a desert that would bloom, that we would have a kotel where we could daven, we could be free people to elect our own government and have Jewish boys carrying rifles to defend the land of Jews after 2,000 years? Would people have believed that? No. No one would believe that. Even the greatest optimist, somebody who is crazy optimistic, would never have the level of optimism to believe that. Impossible. But kaveh, to have hatikvah, kol od baleva of panima, generations. My great-grandparents, your great-grandparents, grandparents, would they have ever believed it? They were not optimistic that there would be a Jewish state, but they were hopeful. They had tikvah. We never lost hope over generations. We still said, V'li Yerushalayim Me'echa B'rachmim Tashav, Es Semach David Avdecha. There's no yish. There's no giving up hope. It doesn't mean it's always going to be perfect. And for the people who did not live to see the state of Israel, for them it was a hope that they did not see ever lived in their lifetime, fulfilled. But the hope still remained. Those grandparents of ours, parents of ours, they took that hope to their grave. Their neshama lived with that hope in the next world. And that's what I hope we can all walk away with when we think of Pesach Tikvah. That we go from Emek Achor, from a place of Rahman al-Itzlan, of betrayal, of Yish, to realizing there's no such thing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes us on a walk and he says, Yesh tikva la'acharisech. There's always tikva. There's always hope. Doesn't mean it's going to turn out happy and rosy in the end in any particular circumstance. Bitachon does not mean it's going to be a happy ending. There's a lot of pain, there's a lot of suffering. But bitachon means we trust the Rebbe Shalom is with us. We trust that he knows what's best for us. We trust that he's aware of what's going on and he's going to make it square and right. So we can always hope. We can hope that that realization is going to take place in our lives. We can hope that by participating in the process, whether it's by building the land of Israel, contributing to causes, but most importantly, kaveh meaning davening. Right? Someone told me a Maisa, they came to Rav Yashiv Zatzal with a particular crisis. And they went and they asked him what to do about this particular situation. And they said, well, we could do this or this or this. And they said, well, I guess the other thing is we just daven. And he said to them, what do you mean just daven? Davening is the main thing. To get rid of coronavirus, the ikar is the davening. Yes, we also have to go to the lab. We have to do what we can. We have to make our nishtadlus. Bitachon does not mean be passive. People who are optimistic are passive. Jews don't believe in optimism. We don't believe in sitting back and say, God, make a miracle for us. We need to drain the swamp. Yoshua needed to fight the armies. We need to set up our own state. We don't say, Petach Tikvah. Tikvah is optimism. No, Petach Tikvah means hope. So we needed courageous pioneers who were Moser Nefesh to drain swamps. We need to do the things in the world to create that hope, to make it a reality. But ultimately, where does HaTikvah come from? It comes from our Kav. Tikva comes from the Nafshi, Kivsa Nafshi, our recognition that we have a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that it's his world. It's only you, Rabbona Shalom. So we're asking you, through all the mechanism of davening, and that's a whole nother discussion of how davening works and what it means, but ultimately we say, Kavi al Hashem, we say, Rabbona Shalom, please help us. And when the answer doesn't come the way we want it, we say, Chazak v'yam yisabecha v'kavi al Hashem. We're going to keep hoping. It's going to be Tisha B'Av unless the Mashiach comes. People saw in the desert, every year people died, but they didn't lose hope to go to Israel. Every year people were incinerated, they were gassed, they were tortured, but they didn't lose hope the next day. We are called upon to be people of tikvah, ha-tikvah. It's challenging, it's not easy to be hopeful. It's hard. And in that moment, it's very painful. But yet we should remember that the tocheles of bitachon, which we need to nurture, and maybe just by having this conversation, it helps us nurture it. The consequence of bitachon is ultimately, it's tikvah, it's hope. It's the kav that we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we can strengthen. And so halavai, by thinking about this tikvah, the ha-tikvah, the hope, we can each take it into our own personal lives to strengthen our emunah, our bitachon, but ultimately this midah of tikvah, of hope, that things can get better, they can be mended, they can bring about the Mashiach, and we should hopefully merit, in the merit of our tefillos, of our kavi el Hashem and chazak v'yam yisabecha. We didn't get a vaccine yet, but kavi el Hashem, through ishtadlos, but ultimately through tefillah, we can connect to that kav and hopefully merit a Yeshua on every level, personally, nationally, and for the entire world. I thank you for a most incredible, beautiful, uplifting, spectacular year of learning. I bless all of us that we should have Yeshuas in our world, in our lives, and that all of our kivisi, all of our hopes will be realized to be together in Yerushalayim, b'mehera v'yameinu. I hope you'll continue. I daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we will be able to continue to provide Torah learning for all of us. And the Mirz Hashem, the Kol will continue. We've got a lot of amazing